is here, so we'll invite you up. Joy, if you don't mind going a little bit early, that's fine. So Joy, just for your information, you have 10 minutes in total. A bell will go off at 5, but you can continue speaking, and we'd just like to have a little bit of time at the end to ask any questions we might have. So welcome, and just up the front of the room there. Lorraine's here too. Oh, awesome, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
I oppose the Napier City Council's recommendation, and I propose that a sinking lid policy on gambling machines with no relocations is adopted. I have done paid and voluntary work for over 50 years in Hawke's Bay within government and various community organisations. I have taught in secondary schools and tertiary institutions, worked and volunteered in the disability, mental health, domestic violence sectors, spent 12 years with Housing New Zealand and was a kaimahi with a kaupapa Māori service working with youth. Presently, I work at the Hawke's Bay School for Teenage Parents, based at William Colenso College, sit on a justice panel for Taiwhenua o Heretaunga, and am a Justice of the Peace. Over the years, as I moved from one role to another, I have witnessed the harm that an individual can suffer when they gamble and the distress that can impact on their families. Gambling does not discriminate, but some people with more income available can better hide the problem, whereas the lower socio-economic groups are hit the hardest. I have seen children unable to go to school because of no food, no uniforms, or no permanent home. The children can miss out on sports or a school camp because of the lack of funds in the home. Some children with disabilities qualify for their own benefit from 16 years of age. Unfortunately, I have known a caregiver with a gambling addiction use this benefit for gambling instead of providing financial support for the child's needs. While working in Housing New Zealand, I came across homeowners who gambled and lost their homes to mortgagee sales. The families then had to navigate the rental and state housing sectors, which was exceedingly difficult for them without references or a poor credit rating. I'm sure most of you would understand that financial pressures can lead to other stresses in a family: domestic violence, mental health, suicides, not accessing healthcare, power cut off, etc. Some clients have told me that by gambling there is always a hope of winning and solving their financial problems. The gambling machines are their friends and it helps pass the time. They said they even dress up to go there. I have always discussed referrals to agencies for help and support when I suspect or am aware that a person has a gambling addiction. It takes a lot of courage and despair before a person will admit they have a problem. One of my clients gave me permission to tell you this today in her words. My grandfather used to take me to the pokies as a child. This became normal for me. When I turned 18 years, my dad passed away. I had no friends at the time and very little support from family. I started going to the pokies for stress relief. One time I came out with $600 and was over the moon. Then I started to lose money. I had 2 children, so I had to lie a lot to provide them with food. It impacted greatly on my mental health. I found it hard because there were machines everywhere. I had to make a choice between my partner and children versus the pokies. Finally, I asked for help and was referred to Te Rangi Haiata, and I banned myself from places with pokies. Now everything in my life is so much better. One day I visited a new client to introduce myself. I'd allowed 20 minutes in my busy schedule for the visit. She was a teen mum, and when I arrived she was sitting on the steps of her private rental crying. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me she had no prepaid power, no nappies, no formula and no food. This was because her benefit was paid into her grandmother's account, and the grandmother was a gambler. That week, all the benefit had gone on the pokies. It took me 4 hours to sort out a bank account, food and power for the young mum. Some people argue that various community groups rely on funds from gambling, but at what cost to some of the people and the families who provided those funds originally? It is very interesting to me that often gambling machines are placed in the lower socio-economic areas that are already identified as having poor income, health and housing. In New Zealand, income is one of the main social determinants of health. When there are addictions on top of low incomes, this creates extremely poor outcomes. Personally, I feel that restricting access to machines is a great preventative measure to prevent and minimise harm. Therefore, I propose a sinking lid policy on gambling machines with no relocation is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy. I will just open up to councillors for any questions that you might have. No. Thank you very much for taking the time and come and make a submission today, Joy. It's much appreciated. Now I understand, Lorraine, we have you here with us, so I'll... and we have a YouTube link that you'll be sharing. I'm sure that's all been arranged.
Yes, your wonderful staff.
Fabulous. And just so you know, you have 10 minutes in total. A bell will go at 5, but you can carry on. Just we have a little bit of time at the end for some
Might
questions.
start pebbling.
Passion is a wonderful thing.
To do that, you need to sit over this side of the table.
Plenty of passion flowing in here.
I want you to hear what I'm saying, not run off the sea.
Oh, great, thank you. Welcome.
Kei te ariki, i ngā iwi, i ngā reo, i ngā hauewha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Lorraine Tipene, taku ingo, he whai ora te rangihai a tō ranga hei. My name is Lorraine Tipene and I am a whai ora of Te Rangihai a tō ranga. A whai ora is a person seeking wellness. And Te Rangihai a tō ranga, as you probably already know, is the official name of Gambling Hawke's Bay, which is a non-profit organisation run off its feet, helping people like me and affected parties of gambling. Oh. Why am I a whai ora? Because I am sick. I am a gambling addict. This is why I oppose the cap system, oppose the relocation option and support the sinking lid option. Gambling venues harm our community, and I'm here today to tell you of my first-hand experience with gambling in the hope that it will make you think long and hard about what this review is reviewing and what you wish this review to accomplish. I lost everything because of the pokies, my 40-year marriage, my home, my jobs, my friends, my physical health, my mental well-being, and whatever I had in the bank, which was close to $500,000. But most of all, I lost the trust and respect people had in me, and any self-worth I had in myself. Seeing the look of disappointment and betrayal in the eyes of my spouse and children was the hardest thing I have ever endured. Just to take a breath from me, I'd like to share a trailer with you now for a documentary which I sincerely hope you will all have the opportunity to watch in full before voting and making your final decisions. The review is called Kitching. The documentary is called Kitching. I'm not going to get this thing, I'm not very good with these fingers, especially when they're shaking like this. Where is the sound? We need the sound.
He's still on.
Can we take this off my 5 minutes?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. She's not shaking, it'll work now.
Bottom right one, Anna.
Has somebody muted it down here?
Slot machines have been called the crack cocaine of gambling, electronic morphine.
The poker machine is the evil genius, or the person who created the poker machine.
The heart of a game is math. That's our product.
I have such pity for the people that play them because I've designed hundreds of these games.
I tend to think of the games as like little movies. You just have one scene, though, that kind of plays over and over again.
These incredibly complex machines where you don't really know if you're winning.
There needs to be something that pulls them to the machine, and that's what the graphics are.
I really, like a strong pair of eyes.
You don't want them to become too mindful and they keep plugging away.
Those machines are so powerfully built
I recognise this lady.
that
She's a senator in
they're
Australia.
built for addiction.
If you stimulate the dopamine neurons, you're already halfway into the direction of addiction.
What other things besides drugs might turn on this system? Could we see the system turn on in a game of chance?
Suddenly, the neurons were going wild.
You're like a rat that's sitting there key pressing to get a little jolt of electricity in your reward system.
I consented to playing. I didn't consent to unlawful hypnotism.
The house will win. There's no chance. It's just built that way.
I wish we'd had the opportunity to watch the documentary in full here today, but we just don't have the time. It explains things a whole lot better than what I can, but I'll try the best that I can. As you've heard, gambling machines are designed very specifically by mathematicians, graphic artists, and musical and sound geniuses to be as addictive as possible. In other words, to create addicts. The timing of the reels rolling, the music and sound effects, and the graphics wizardry have all been designed to be as conducive as possible to keeping someone transfixed in a constant state of anticipation. They are also specifically designed, as you heard, through the maths behind the graphics to create losers. Most machines are set at between 85 to 92% return. Let's say a machine is set at 90, easy figures. Put in 100, pull out 90. We put in that 90, we get back 81. We put in that 81, we get back 72.90. And so on and so on and so on, until we've got nothing left to put back in. A full bet loss deliberately has no sound, silence. A 1 cent prize on a $2 bet, however, gives flashing congratulatory signage with all the music, sounds of coins and clapping and all the bells and whistles to disguise the fact that really it was a $1.99 loss. Some people laugh at that, we shouldn't. In the full documentary, the mathematicians, graphic artists and musicians tell us what it is that they do and what their instructions were that they are following. Much study has now been done on the neurological and physiological changes in addicts. Brain mapping of a person sitting playing the pokies matches identically the brain mapping of a cocaine addict. And the full version of the documentary shows that. In fact, in the DSM, the Bible of Psychiatric Medicine, for over 60 years, gambling disorder has now been moved to the substance abuse chapter, sharing the same classification as Class A drug addictions alongside cocaine, heroin and other opiates. In this case, why do we even allow one pokie venue when it should really be regarded as no different to an opium den? Would we sanction a legalised opium den across the road where we currently have a gaming venue just because of the revenue it generates? I don't think so. Pokies induce addiction, which is a sickness. No different to heroin addiction. Even the semantics hide the reality. A shop is a shop, a restaurant is a restaurant. So why do we allow the innocuous and misleading term gaming venue instead of calling it for what it is, a dangerous gambling den? In ignorance, just like the lady on the trailer said, I agreed to put my first lot of money into a gaming machine. I did not knowingly agree or consent to be being turned into an addict. My losses were huge and life-changing for me personally, but what we are not seeing or hearing about here are the harms and hidden losses and costs to society as a whole, and of those there are many and they are long-term. Families are destroyed irrevocably, as are friendships. The retail industry is suffering because the millions of dollars which used to go through the Napier stores and tills is now going straight into the pokies. The real cost of having these machines is being subsidised by every man and woman in this room and every man and woman in the workforce. Why? Because the cost isn't just for the individual gambler and their loved ones. It is taken up by the community at large in the form of hospital hours for those who are suicidal as a result of their gambling, mental health costs from resultant job losses, depression, self-harm, etc., and of ongoing counselling. Those shoppers who take something out of their grocery trolley to put into a charity bin because the gambler has paid all their grocery money, rent money, nappy money, all their money into the pokies. The free lunches distributed in schools and the small businesses which closed down with innocent workers also losing their employment as well. My job seekers' employment is paid for with your taxes, ladies and gentlemen, with disability allowances. And I'm just one of many recipients who lost my job directly as a result of gambling. I'm able to be here to speak with you today only because of what you and all of the community have done for me for the last 10 years while I seek wellness. 10 long years for 3 months of putting money in a machine. That's a long time. Every day I have to try and forgive myself for being sick because of what it is costing you. Some years ago, central government sent a mandate out to local government to form partnerships with their local communities, constituting personnel from all sectors, including, but not exclusive to, tangata whenua, health and education providers, police and other identified stakeholders. The purpose of this mandate was so that district plans and policies, like we're reviewing here today, were written for the betterment of each community with input from those within it. Specifically, it was for effective community government partnerships in achieving welfare outcomes, creating opportunities for work, strengthening families, and improving childhood outcomes. How do the pokies, which take so many millions of dollars away from the community, in any way compensate for the few thousand that they give back in the form of grants? They don't. Please think about these things before casting your votes. Do the proposed changes to this gambling venue policy do what central government has mandated we do? Will the changes achieve identified welfare goals? Will they help strengthen families, or will they continue to decimate them? There is strict legislation regarding the responsible service of alcohol in New Zealand, whereby the venue can receive huge fines for non-compliance. In the case of gaming machines, though, we leave the responsibility pretty much entirely up to the irresponsible gambler. the addict. Now is your opportunity to be a responsible community advocate and leader by saying, having the 0800 number to call on the machine does not absolve us of our obligations and responsibility to curb the growth of gambling in our district and to minimise the harm to the community caused by gambling. Our gambling venue policy doesn't have to be like everybody else's in the country. It needs to be proactively reducing the harm to our community, starting now. Some facts. Addicts lie. Firstly, to conceal their addiction, and secondly, to feed their addiction. Addicts borrow money beyond their means of repayment to feed their addiction. Addicts tend to be reclusive, thereby losing the benefits of social connections, exercise and sunshine, which are all essential elements for the making of a physically and mentally healthy human being and therefore community. Addicts often turn to crime and steal to finance their addiction. Addiction is a sickness. Pokies are designed to create addicts and to create losers, which harms our community. Let's get responsible and fulfil our obligations. Say no to the capped system. Say no to relocation. Say yes to sinking lid. It's only a small step and a long road, but it's the first step we can take. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Lorraine, I will just open up if there's any questions from councillors. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Lorraine, for your submission. I really appreciate it. It's great to hear a kind of first-hand example of your experience, and thank you for being so candid with us. I'm interested. You know, we've heard a lot that harm is not minimised by the number of machines. I'm just interested in your first-hand experience of that.
Yes, I've been banned for different periods of time when I've self-banned. When I have felt that I'm at risk and the 2 years is up, then I've contacted my support person and had it reinstated. I honestly believe that councils need to start lobbying central government to have all gaming machines removed entirely from our communities, from our country as a whole. We do not have to be a little Las Vegas. There's much more harm than there is good. Does that answer your question, or did I waylay?
No, I think I got where you would like us to be. Thank you.
So forceful. I am passionate.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and particularly thank you for sharing your own story with us. I know that can't have been easy, and
not.
No, so we do appreciate you taking the time today to come and talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you, Council.
Good, Lorraine. Thank you. Thank you.
They're giving you eyes on it, does it? I'm blind as well.
Thank you. Now, I believe we have Kath Healy. Oh, fine. Welcome, Kath. Now, you have 10 minutes in total. A bell will go at 5, but just as long as we have a minute or so at the end to ask questions, that's good as gold.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
He aha te menui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is the people, it is the people, it is the people. Kia ora koutou, ko Kath Healy taku ingoa, kei te mahi ahau ki te rangihaeta oranga, no ahuriri ahau, kei Onekawa ahau e noho ana. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
So my name is Kath Healy. I'm one of the councillors at Te Rangihaeta Oranga. I live in Napier. I'm born and bred in Maraenui, actually. So my role is guided and informed by the Ministry of Health contract to strategy to prevent and minimise gambling harm. So that's the mahi that I do all day, every day. I'm very excited to be here today to discuss and harness this opportunity to minimise gambling harm in the beautiful city of Napier. So I oppose the Council's proposed policy and advise that a sinking lid with no relocations policy be adopted. So the purpose of this review today is to minimise gambling harm as directed by the Gambling Act 2003. The exact wording from Council is, the policy determines whether Class 4 and standalone TAB venues can be established in the district, and if so, where they can be located. Through these controls, the policy aims to minimise harm in the community, to minimise harm to the community caused by this type of gambling. This review comprises of verbal and written submissions to inform the council's decision-making process. And again, the exact wording from Council is, Council also wishes to hear from our community of any ideas for managing and minimising the harm caused by gambling in general. As pokie gambling and gambling harm is deeply entrenched in our community, the best way that we can minimise harm is through reducing opportunities for people to gamble. Research tells us that accessibility, the more venues within a community, increases gambling harm. A sinking lid with no relocations policy would see a gradual reduction in pokie venues and a gradual reduction in gambling harm. This would be a very slow process that would be a step in the right direction and support the Council's policy aim of minimising harm to the community. I completed a Masters of Professional Practice in 2019 that focused on the gambling sector, gambling harm and gambling policy. My research project was a critical analysis of gambling policy, in particular Part 4, Subpart 3 of the Gambling Act, regulations relating to harm prevention and minimisation. Some of the recommendations from my research that are relevant to today's review are that local gambling policymakers fully utilise their territorial authority as stated in Section 101 of the Gambling Act. Today is the opportunity where you, the Council, can make a pragmatic step to minimise gambling harm through adopting a sinking lid with no relocations policy. Another recommendation for local policymakers is that they align their policies to uphold the values and priority goals of local safer community groups. The Safer Napier Group state that one of their priority goals is that the community is free from addiction-related harm, including gambling addiction. Minimising access to the highly addictive and highly accessible pokie machines through a sinking lid and no relocations policy will help to achieve the Safer Napier priority goal. The final recommendation for the purpose of this review is to uphold the Crown's obligation to Māori through honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the enactment of the principles of partnership, participation and protection, reducing the number of pokie venues in our community through adopting a sinking lid with no relocations policy will act as a protective factor for Māori who disproportionately experience generational gambling harm. As I stated earlier, the purpose of this review and the Napier City Council's gambling revenue policy is to minimise gambling harm as directed by the Gambling Act 2003. And although this is a straightforward process, I hope that the Council engage in critical thinking and, moreover, critical listening throughout this process. As you listen to the many narratives and kōrero today and tomorrow, it is important not to be distracted, but to remain focused on the purpose of this review, to establish a policy that minimises gambling harm. I want to draw attention to two distractions that divert focus away from the purpose of this hui. The first distraction is online gambling. A kōrero that you are likely to hear is that of online gambling and how reducing gambling venues will increase online gambling. The thought here is that some online gambling is not regulated by the government and that the money spent on online gambling will not be funnelled into the pokies and community funding. A survey undertaken by Health Promotion Agency, and I think you guys have got a bit of a printout, titled The Impact of COVID was published in April 2020. Part of this survey reveals gambling statistics that tell us 12% of people increased their online gambling during the lockdown period and 8% started gambling online. 24 gambled online less than usual, 33% gambled the same as usual, and 23% of those surveyed don't gamble online. And although there was an increase in new and online gambling of 20%, it is important to remember that this was during the lockdown period when there was no access to gambling venues at all. One other area highlighted through this study was the type of online gambling that people engaged in during lockdown. 65% was My Lotto, 19% TAB, 16% Instant Kiwi, 8% Sky City Casino online, and 14% overseas and gaming websites. These statistics tell us that the majority of engaged online gambling is regulated by New Zealand law, and only 14% of online gambling is that with unregulated overseas and overseas gaming sites. This survey brings forward relevant data about online gambling and what actually occurred when there was no access to gambling venues at all. The second distraction, and what appears to be the most influential distraction, is that of gambling revenue. Today and tomorrow you are likely to hear from community groups who rely on funding that comes from the pokies. There is no doubt that these organisations are providing valuable services and resources to our community. However, listening to the funding needs of these organisations does not minimise gambling harm. It distracts us away from the purpose of this hui. Furthermore, adopting a sinking lid with no relocations policy will gradually reduce funding opportunities, not decimate them completely. To conclude my kōrero, it is important that the Council takes a bold, ethical and equitable leap and fully embrace their responsibility to minimise gambling harm within the community. As a policy review happens every 3 years, there is no time to make a half-hearted attempt to minimise gambling harm. I propose that the Council adopt a sinking lid with no relocations policy. This is the best, if not the only way, that gambling harm can be minimised in our beautiful city. There's really no other options for us. He aha te me nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is the people. It is the people. It is the people. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, thank you, Kath. I will just open up for any questions from councillors. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Kath, thank you for your submission. I noticed you referenced a few times in both your written and your submission today obviously the reduction of gambling harm, which is what we're all here to do.
Yes.
And that the reduction in gaming machines is the only way to do that.
Yes.
How would you, and I know you've done some research on this, I'm just interested in your view, how would you correlate the fact that we have reduced gaming machines over a number of years and not seen a reduction in gambling harm? Why continuing to do that will have a different effect?
Well, as I sort of said at the end, it's really the only solution that we have here. It's the only viable option. What really needs to happen is the machines need to be designed in a different way so they're not as highly addictive, and also the venue layout needs to be more open, because it's a little spot hidden away where you can go and gamble undetected. You can take off your social mask in there and do as you will. So the whole system of gambling through the pokies is really designed to be addictive by nature. So if we could change the design of the machines and change the venue layout, that would definitely take us further. That would be much more pragmatic than the option that we have today. But this is the space that we're working in, so this is where we can make some influence and some change.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson, then Councillor Tupney.
Tēnā koe. I see this report was done on the 17th of April, noting the impacts of COVID-19. But it's kind of only 3 weeks into the lockdown. Is there any more up to date, because it's 2020?
No, that's all I have.
Yeah, just aware that there's 3 weeks into the lockdown, and the lockdown was a lot longer than that. So
But-
on the assumption that this is the statistics, one would expect that lockdown lasted a lot longer than that. You could even double them.
Well, that's an assumption, sir. These
Yeah,
are
that's fair.
Statistics.
Yep.
These are facts. So
Was-
that's why I brought them along, because they were relevant. They were local.
No,
Like,
100%.
so it was from Aotearoa. It was gambling specific, and it was the closest thing that I could get to that was contextual. That was from Aotearoa, not some global or off. Different area.
Yep.
So it was really just to piece some ideas and piece some statistics together. And I appreciate what you're saying, but
Yeah.
that was the best data.
No,
that
that's
I
cool. I
could
appreciate
get
it. Thank you.
at the
Thank you.
time.
Councillor Tupney.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Kia ora, Kath, ngā mihi nui ki a koe.
Kia ora.
I'm sort of putting this question together as sound comes out of my mouth, really. The dilemma I have is this. We've heard from the industry around the national statistics and their interpretation of harm based on those statistics. And I'm really glad that you were here to hear Lorraine's korero, which was absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
And I noticed straight away your feedback around how we might try and find a space to change the ambience and the motivators in that room. But my question is this: all this information that's coming before us gets quite mixed around. Are we talking about a national gambling? Are we talking about a local thing? Well, actually, we're only talking about Class 4 in this review. And so what I'm not picking up from this data is, and has been alluded to, is how significant to that portion of market, because you're working at the end of our community that picks up the fragmented pieces, yeah? So would you say that the Class 4 is overrepresented in the number of cases you're referring? We've seen statistics to say that 50% of the work that comes in is Class 4 related. So what I'm asking is, from your work in the community and based on what you know and off the back of Lorraine's korero,
Yes.
how dominant would you say the Class 4 machines are in fueling this inequity and this harm?
At least 3/4, 80% of the people that we work with are sitting in front of us because of a pokie gambling addiction, or they're whānau affected where money's going into the pokies. So that's my job. I'm the clinical team leader, so I see every referral that comes through. I'm allocating with my team referrals that come through. We're doing walk-ins off the street that are just coming in to ban themselves from pokie gambling. So it's prevalent, it's predominant in the mahi that I do all day, every day. I've been there for 5 years. Nothing much has changed.
And just finally, a comment more than a question, Your Worship, and that was thank you for highlighting from your opinion that the only opportunity for us is to work around those Class 4 in that particular environment. So clearly you would agree that it's probably, as it's the only thing we can work with,
Yes.
and our focus needs to be around how we can mitigate that harm, because there's a lot of talk around revenue, there's a lot of talk around statistics and what comes back, but we're all sort of avoiding the precursor to that, which is the harm that we're picking up at the end.
And just to reiterate again, those are distractions. The purpose of this hui is to minimise gambling harm. Full stop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
No, don't let him.
Of the 80% that you're talking about, is that Napier or Hawke's Bay, Napier Hastings?
That's Hawke's Bay. So we are Hawke's Bay Gambling Recovery Service.
Yep.
Yep.
Because a figure was quoted earlier, I think 217 people that your service was dealing with. Was that number just Napier, or was that Napier and Hastings?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyone able to clarify that?
No, that was part of a separate submission, so I think it's
Yeah.
probably not really fair to expect anyone here to be able to answer a question regarding it.
I just thought someone might have been listening earlier, that was all.
I don't know. I don't know that they specified.
I actually thought it was Napier, Councillor McGrath.
yeah.
I think it was Napier.
Okay, that's cool.
I highlighted in my notes in the submission.
See, when you call them out for listening, all of a sudden they did.
Yeah, and
that's cool.
I understand it's Napier based, and the amount of revenue that's come out, all of those things, that is harm. If there's whatever $1 million coming out, that has to be translated as harm. Well, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Ka pai?
Thank you very much for your time today, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Next we have Hina Riata. Welcome. Just to let you know, Hina Riata, you have 10 minutes. You'll hear a bell at 5, but you can continue. We just need a little bit of time at the end for questions.
Just to have forgotten it.
Great. And just to let you know, Councillor Price and Councillor Crown have a conflict, so they're not able to ask any questions, but the rest of us can.
Kia ora koutou. Hello everyone. I'm a bit nervous at the moment, but I know I'm in good hands. But anyway, I sit here today proposing to the council to adopt a sinking lid with no relocations policy. February the 19th, 2020, I broke the shackles of an addiction by placing an exclusion on myself. February the 19th, 2020, I put an exclusion on myself from an addiction that spanned 3 decades. That's 30 years. 3 decades, 30 years of a pokie machines addiction that spiralled out of control. 3 decades, 30 years pokie machines addiction that affected my children who went without the basic necessities. 3 decades, 30 years of a pokie machine addiction that became harmful. 3 decades, 30 years of a pokie machines addiction that destroyed me financially, mentally, my self-esteem, my whānau, emotionally and spiritually. Personally, a pokie machines addiction is no different to any other addiction. I sit here today to be a voice for those that suffer in silence from the addiction of pokie machines. Again, I sit here today proposing to the council to adopt a sinking lid with no relocation policy. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Hina Riata, for sharing your personal story with us. I will just ask if councillors have any questions for you. Councillor Tapani.
Tēnā koe, one question, and I'm hoping it's nice and easy. In the 3 decades and 30 years that you were held prisoner by those machines, and I'm reading it to your kupu, how many times would you say in that 30 years did the staff come to you in those venues and say, hey, we've noticed you've got an issue?
Not once.
Not once. How many times in that 30 years would you say you received pamphlets that were readily available within those facilities?
Pardon?
The leaflets and information brochures that they provide, the written paper. Do you think even one? Were you
Pardon?
given any written documentation
Not
identifying that? How many?
Not once.
Not once.
No.
So would you say then in the 3 decades and 30 years that you were imprisoned, did you receive any help from the facilities that were providing those machines?
Not once.
So after 3 decades and 30 years, the only one who took action was yourself on February the 19th, 2020?
It was my decision that I needed help with. I had had enough of a 30-year addiction that, I sought help myself. I Yes, I
I
wasn't ordered or anything. I did it for myself. I went and sought help.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in
You're
today. I
welcome.
appreciate you,
Kia
and
ora.
also Lorraine and others sharing that whakaaro.
ora.
Ngā mihi.
Councillor Mawson.
First of all, congratulations on it. Congratulations on getting through that. That's awesome, and good on you for coming here and sharing your story. Thank you for that. Just because we're talking about things here in a Napier context, were the venues that you attended, were they in Napier?
Hawke's Bay. Both actually. It was in Hastings and Napier.
Okay, so you didn't get any assistance from any of them you went to at all? Not Napier or Hastings?
No.
Thank you. Thanks.
Sorry, I have a hearing problem.
No, that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much for coming in and taking the time to talk to us today. Thank you.
Kia ora.
This money you're elected.
Looks like we'll be having a short break while we wait for our next submitter, who is due to arrive in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, we haven't got her.
No.
And I did try to bring her.
Yeah, that's fine.